Good day. I'm Gerald Goldfarb, and this is our television discussion show entitled Inside Law. What we try to do in this show is to have discussions with interesting legal personalities in the Los Angeles community in the hope that we can give the ordinary person in the public an inside view about how the legal system really works. I'm a practicing lawyer in Los Angeles, and our guest today is a retired Superior Court judge, recently retired, the Honorable Raymond Choate. Judge Choate, thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Jerry.
You're welcome. As a practicing lawyer, I've always been and am very much concerned about the crowdedness of the courts. And I remember an occasion, I believe it was the last day that you sat as a judge. By coincidence, I was in the Santa Monica Superior Court.
About June 15th.
About June 15th. It was a Friday afternoon for a trial-setting conference. And when I got to the courthouse and I got to the courtroom that I was supposed to be at, I thought they were playing a popular movie because there was a line of lawyers coming out of the door and winding all around the building. And then when we finally got in there, it was quite crowded. There were over 100 lawyers trying to do business and only one judge. And it seemed to me like this was probably not the right way to run a railroad. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'll tell you, you wandered into what's known as a trial setting and status conference. And it's true that there are about 120 cases set, and maybe 80 of those cases. In 80 of those cases, the lawyers will show up.
I had a case before you once of psychiatric malpractice, you might remember. And
I recall that case.
And the delay was such that it really had an unfortunate effect on my client. She couldn't get on with her life. She was still waiting for this lawsuit, which was hanging on.
I've heard of that syndrome, the litigation syndrome. People are just waiting for the time when they can get to court, and nothing seems to happen in the meantime in their lives until after it's over.
And then sometimes they recover fast. That's another odd syndrome. I'm interested to ask you about what you're doing now. I know that you retired recently from the court, and I want to know why you retired, partly. And I also want to know, I understand you're now working as a rent-a-judge.
Yes.
And I'd like you to tell us a little about that.
Why I retired?
Yeah.
Well, I retired because I was becoming advanced in years, and
with that head of hair, Judge, it's hard to believe that.
And I wanted to take off from the bench while I could still be useful to myself in the rent-a-judge business.
This system is sort of an alternative to the normal Superior Court. If you don't want to be involved in the Superior Court, litigants can actually hire private judges to handle their disputes.
They can agree upon a judge, and by stipulation or agreement, they can go to that judge, and the code provisions, the Civil Code of Procedure allows the cause to be submitted to a judge.
And then they don't have to wait for 5 years. They can hire a judge, they pay the judge, like yourself,
Yes.
And instead of waiting 5 years, they can get justice promptly.
That's true.
Marvin, maybe we can start off our conversation by finding out a little bit about your history. Now you're an eminent man, but how did you start out as a lawyer?
Well, I'm happy to tell you, Gerald, that I started out completely alone. When I got out of law school back in 1957, when out of law school I passed the bar, of course, and I went around and jobs were hard to get, as they probably are now. So I said I'd open my own office. So I found an office to open. I rented it for $100 a month. Now the rent has increased, I guess, about 500-fold. And I had a champagne party, invited everyone I knew. Mm-hmm. Everyone came, but I didn't get any business from those people, but someone brought a friend. Mm-hmm. And I got my first case, and of course my first case was very thrilling to me. Mm-hmm. And I became a specialist in almost everything. I used to put in 15, 20 hours a day. Sometimes I still do. But I enjoyed doing that, and so I really started from the ground up and never looked back.
I don't think people realize how difficult it is to represent clients in divorce cases. Don't you run into the problem where the client says one thing one day and the next week the change of mind, and the next week another change of mind, and your instructions, how can you go forward with your job when they're changing their minds?
You're very much the middle. As a matter of fact, I think the divorce lawyer is the third party in an inherently two-party situation. And strange as you hardly can ever please anyone completely, because you know, I remember once, and it was the Pamela Mitchelson case, where my client had come to me at the time, and I wrote about this in a book called Made in Heaven, Settled in Court, rather aptly named at the time. But when Pamela came to me, she'd been through a couple other lawyers and was sort of disenchanted. Things hadn't gone right. She says, those days, you know, getting $1 million was the proverbial, that was the height to get $1 million. She says, I want to get $1 million. And the night before the trial, I'd subpoenaed 43 witnesses. We were going forward the next morning. We were in about a 2-day negotiating sessions with James' lawyers. And finally, at 1 a.m., I called him. I said, would you take $2 million? And up until this time, she didn't have any kind words for James because they were going through this bitter divorce. I said, would you take $2 million? She says, well, you're joking. I said, no. I'd managed in a 20-hour session to get it up to over $2 million. I said, will you take it? She says, well, of course. And then suddenly she says, poor James, what have they done to him? And in that moment, there was that attempt to protect her husband because she still loved him.
A related problem that I've seen arise, I've seen it in the literature particularly, and maybe even in my practice too, is sometimes, particularly like where men and female divorce clients will sometimes form a kind of emotional attachment to the lawyer, whether it's you or me or some other divorce lawyer. And I've seen litigation in Illinois. There was a malpractice case in which the Illinois divorce lawyer had intimate relations with his female client, and then later on she sued him for malpractice, saying he hadn't represented her properly. Is that you have that kind of
Well,
problem?
I would say it's a danger area. Of course, a professional person should certainly try to avoid any kind of attachments to clients that go beyond the attorney-client relationship or even a friendship. You know, you do become friends with people sometimes, and you meet interesting people, but, you know, it's almost like moving. You live in a place and then you move to the next place and you go on with your life, and they should be going on with their lives. You're really there to try to get someone over a bridge of troubled waters, to be sure, but that's about as far as it should go. And of course, you know, a lonely woman or, you know, another person they come into your life and they feel devastated, and they not only lost their husband, but they're, you know, the friends usually go with the one who has the money.
Let's talk about the palimony situation. You really were the innovator there, and I think it's changed a lot, the way that people look at marriage and look at divorce. And somebody said to me just this morning, oh, you're having Marvin Mitchelson on. Why don't you ask him why people should even bother getting married anymore? But I think they should.
I think maybe it's driven people to get married more.
I think it has.
I think it's affected it this way. You know, before the Marvin case, there wasn't actually in this country, except for the few states that had common law marriage, the difference being in common law marriage, people intend to hold themselves out as being married in every respect except they didn't get a license. They have the same rights as married people. In the palimony case, which is of course a media word, it's different. You have to show a contract, usually an oral contract. The case of Marvin versus Marvin, the Supreme Court case, laid down several principles of law that allowed a person to walk through the front door of a courthouse, particularly a woman for the first time, and say, look, we had an agreement. He promised me certain things, and I relied on him, and I did my part, and I promised to be his companion, his confidant, whatever have you. So it's a recognition of those relationships. And during the 70s, we had a 1,500% increase in people living together. So we had significantly thousands of people out there who had these relationships, and 15, 20 years might go by, someone breaks up with someone else and says, okay, I don't owe you a thing because you have no rights. That isn't quite fair. And I saw a case that just absolutely amazed me. It wasn't one of my own. But about 4 months ago or 5 months ago in San Francisco, in a gay case, a man won $1.8 million, pardon me, $2.2 million from his lover, a man he lived with for 17 years, who had the money and had bought a lot of real estate based on the promises that he didn't keep. Now here was a case of gay people, which I've always thought had the same rights, because it's like a partnership.
Well, a contract is a contract,
It's
Marvin.
a contract is a contract, exactly. But here this jury gave him $2.2 million, $800,000 of which was punitive damages. So, I mean, here's a real, talk about an improvement on the original concept.
I'm very happy to have as my guest today a lawyer in Los Angeles named Stephen Yagman. Welcome, Stephen.
Good morning.
Stephen is a controversial and unique lawyer in Los Angeles, a man that many of us admire and that many other people have somewhat different views about. Stephen, maybe we can, I understand you have an office in New York and an office in Los Angeles also. Maybe you can give us some sort of comparison. Is there a police brutality problem worse or better in is there a problem at all? And if so, is it worse or better in New York or LA?
There's virtually no police brutality in New York. There are isolated incidents, some of which are bizarre, like the stun gun incident out in Queens. But comparatively, between Los Angeles and New York, there's no problem in New York, and there's a grave problem in Los Angeles.
Well, I don't understand why. They seem like pretty similar cities to me.
They're not similar at all. They're not similar at all. I think that this is based upon the fact that you have a different police force here. You have a police chief, Gerald Gates, who's basically should be a police chief in Germany in 1942, who's not subject to any political pressure because he's a civil service appointee. He can't be gotten rid of. And he teaches his officers to brook no resistance, to demand instant compliance. And
but
that's
no one's
basically what
trying
the
to
problem
get
is.
rid of Daryl Gates. I don't see anybody even trying to, even if they wanted to.
Everybody's scared to death of him. The mayor's afraid of him. The Board of Police Commissioners is afraid of him. He has a lot of power. I mean, God knows what he has on some of the political officials in this city. You know, photographs perhaps of Mayor Tom Bradley sitting around with someone with a last name that starts with a vowel. I mean, who knows? Who knows what he has? They're scared to death of him. It's incredible. I think absolutely the police chief sets the tone for the department. I think the rest of it is that a lot of the police officers here are younger. They're recruited from the Marine Corps. Many of them aren't married, and this is in comparison to the police officers in New York. They're young, macho, buck-type guys who want to go out and kick ass. And the police chief, through positive statements and omission, encourages them to go out and kick ass. And that's basically what happens.
Is it true that your office handles only such cases?
We only handle cases against the police for violations of those amendments, and sometimes a First Amendment violation, if the police violate somebody's right to freedom of association or freedom of speech.
And how did you get into that specialty? There's many other areas of the law. Why did you choose that one?
I grew up in a home where it was believed that the police were an instrument of repression. And I've never liked the police, basically. And as I got older, I came to learn that, in fact, the police, in general, are a means by which the government represses people in society. I don't like the police.
So telling me earlier, and I was very interested to hear that you don't settle cases. The public may not appreciate this, but in my opinion, the system is designed to have a lot of settlements. And most lawyers are interested in settling cases, and you told me you never settle a case. Explain that.
I'm not part of the system. I'm an outsider. And we only take cases from clients who want to vindicate their rights and improve the system. So the way you do that isn't by settling cases. When you settle a case, you let the government buy you. You're being bought out. The Constitution can't be bought out as far as I'm concerned. The purpose of bringing a case is to put the police on trial, to make them stand up there and explain the awful things that they've done, because then they're humiliated. You put into play the ancient Greek idea of ostracism. They're ostracized. You make them stand up there and explain why they killed somebody, why they beat somebody over the head. And then maybe they won't do it again because they find the experience police do of trials very unpleasant, especially when I cross-examine them.
Oh, I imagine so. But nonetheless, you can get nice financial recoveries in these cases, can't you?
I'm not in business to make money.
Well, but you still can get nice financial recoveries that your clients receive and that help support your law practice.
I find that irrelevant.
Well, I understand, but the public may not find it irrelevant. What's the largest judgment you ever got against police?
Oh, about $250,000.
So if someone out there has been abused by the police, they don't have to take it. They have a remedy. They can find a lawyer such as yourself and get a nice financial recovery. Isn't that true?
It is.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that the police are, you can sue the police just like you can sue anybody else.
About half of the clients that come to us don't believe you can sue the police. They come in with a quizzical attitude and say, this is what happened. Is it possible to sue them? And I say, you got to be kidding. Of course you can sue them. Let's go do it.
When you litigate these cases, you're in the federal court. You're not in the state court at all. And you're generally against lawyers who are representing the governments, whether it's Los Angeles Police Department or other police departments. What kind of a quality of let me put it this way. In what way does the system, the judges and the lawyers on the other side, react to your lawsuits? Are they angry at you? Are they upset about this? Are they just kind of doing their business? Are the judges really willing to stand up for the rights of people?
Well, the lawyers and the judges fall into two different groups. The lawyers are generally low-caliber attorneys who are working for a low hourly fee, and they're grinding out the papers, and they're generally unhappy and angry because I'm one of the few lawyers who makes them earn their money. I file a lot of motions, I do a lot of things in cases, I don't just go through the motions. The lawyers are basically hired guns. They seem to not care if they win or lose, although they seem to be unhappy when they lose, which is frequently. The judges fall into two groups. The ones who are real judges, who have an idea of justice and a sense of, some of them, noblesse oblige, who give you a fair trial. And then there are the other ones, most of whom were appointed by President Johnson and a few by Nixon, who are just a bunch of jerks. And they think that the federal courts are there to resolve disputes between people who have businesses, and that commercial disputes are what the courts are there for. And with respect to the Constitution, well, if you get in trouble with the police, it's probably your fault, and what the heck are you doing here in my court wasting my time? There are a couple of judges down there who are splendid, there are a couple who are awful, and then the rest of them are kind of in the middle. All you want is a judge from whom you can get a fair trial.
Now, let's say your case is assigned to a judge who you think is a poor judge. Are you stuck with that judge?
In federal court, you're absolutely stuck with a judge if you get a judge who's a turkey.
And if you have a judge who's a turkey, do you get jury trials in these 1983 cases?
I never try cases without a jury, ever, no matter who the judge is, because any judge, no matter whom he or she is a member of the ruling class, simply by virtue of what they're doing. And you basically, in a democracy, don't want a member of the ruling class deciding a claim of a poor person. It just doesn't make sense.
Now, I do a lot of appeals in the Court of Appeal, and I've always been interested to know, I know you also have 3 judges, but each judge has several clerks. And I know the clerks do a lot of work to process these cases and prepare them for the judges' decisions. Now, do the judges actually read all the briefs that come in? Do the judges actually decide these cases? Or are some of the minor cases being decided by clerks and just kind of rubber stamped by judges?
Well, first of all, you have to realize that a great number of the cases that come through, whether they be criminal or civil, are rather mundane and ordinary garden variety cases, wherein an exercise of judgment is not a very big factor. In those cases, it's pro forma in terms of the appeal. However, I don't think there is a judge sitting on the Court of Appeal who does not read all the briefs in each of his or her sets of cases. That does not necessarily mean that that judge reads all the briefs in the cases on which that judge is one of the co-authors.
I'm interested in the women's movement and how it interacts with the legal system, particularly because it always seemed to me that that women would be humanizing, as women got more power in the society at large, that women would be a humanizing and positive influence on the society. And I know that in recent years, women have had a lot more authority in the legal system. When I started to practice law, you hardly ever encountered a woman lawyer. When I was in law school, there were 500 lawyers in my class at law school, and I think 5 of them were women. And now, of course, a great many women are going into the legal system. And I wonder, do you think that are women just men with skirts in the legal system, or are they putting in a little different impact or a different take on the world?
They are having a big impact on the nature of the laws that are passed, the manner in which the judiciary, the court system looks at women, the way in which women are sentenced in court, the domestic relations, new rape laws, incest laws, child care concerns, all these things, I think, and if you look over the past 20 years at the impact of a difference on all these sets of laws, I think that impact is as a consequence of women finally being in a position to call some shots.
Let me just speak a little bit more specifically about some of these changes. For example, sexual harassment. When I was a young lawyer, there was no such thing as that I remember as a lawsuit for sexual harassment, and now there have been some really, that's a going cause of action, and you can get you can get a real recovery for a woman in that kind of case, can't you?
Indeed, you can. I think Gloria Allred has been eminently successful in court with a number of these cases. And just recently, the City Commission on the Status of Women has conducted a study of women workers, about 5,000 of them, and came out with the unglorious statistic of 30% of them, about a third of them felt they had been sexually harassed on the job, mostly in those areas that are dominated by men, like the law enforcement areas and tree trimmers and a couple of other areas, and that these women felt that they weren't able to do anything about that because they thought they'd lose their job.
Do you think the time will come when, instead of having token women on, you were a token woman in the first place, maybe. I don't
sure.
know, but there are more women coming on the court. So will we ever get a situation where the women, instead of having one woman on the Supreme Court, we'll have 3 women on the Supreme Court and no one will think twice about it?
Well, I hope so. I hope so.
The lawyers are making so much money in the private practice that the salaries of your salary is a matter of public record. What is your salary on the Court of Appeal?
I don't know. I think it's about $95,000.
Yeah, well,
some people think that's a lot of money.
Seems like a lot of money to the lay person.
On the other hand, if I were out working in private practice, I could probably make $200,000, $250,000 a year. Plus, if I wanted to leave the bench now and go out and function as a rented judge, I could probably make $100,000 to $200,000.
Well,
in any event, in 1 year, I could make more than I make now, and I've been sitting in this job for a long, long time. And you can't blame some judges if they think, you know, I've really had it up to here. By the time they take this out and this out and this out, what I take home is a very small salary.
Yeah, of course, you don't have to worry about your overhead now. We lawyers in private practice, we have to pay our bills.
That's true.
So that cuts the other way.
That's true.
So we get to money here in this conversation, and we always do in this country. And one of the things that I want to ask you about, and I think one of the things that troubles the public, is that I think nowadays lawyers, I was reading an article recently by Pat Wald, who's on the United States Court of Appeal in the District of Columbia, and she pointed out how lawyers are being viewed these days as so extremely interested in money that some of the professional quality has been lost. Traditionally and historically, a profession was a group of people who did a form of public service and received fair remuneration. There was something different. A professional was not supposed to be a rabid capitalist.
You know, what is it all about? Just a money-grubbing scheme here?
Yeah, I hope that
am I at all concerned about my fellow humanity out there?
I have to interrupt now. I think you're right, but I'm getting the rap sign here.
Oh, are you really?
Yes, we really are.
That's
so we have to bring this program to a close. It's great talking to you, Justice Klein. You're a wonderful guest, and I always enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for being with us. I'm Gerald Goldfarb. This has been the television program Inside Law. I hope that if anyone is interested, they can write to Inside Law in care of this station. Thank you very much for being with us today, ladies and gentlemen, and we hope you'll be looking at our program in future months. Good day.
You gotta